Happy New Year. I hope your holidays were awesome. I hope you're happy to be settled back into your routines, and hopefully you're excited for this second season of The Hearth. Thank you for everybody that listened and commented and everything throughout the last year. It was so encouraging, and I feel like I learned a lot, and I have big plans this year to try to expand back into video and all those things. And so before we go any further, make sure you're liking, you're subscribing, you're signing up, ringing bells, whatever platform you're on. Do all the things because you don't want to miss what's coming. And of course, all the links in the description if you want to help give towards some new equipment so that I can get back to doing videos and make this podcast just better and better and be able to reach more people. So I've wanted to share something that I have had on my mind throughout the final months of 2024 that I never really brought out in the pulpit or anything in my preaching ministry. And I'm not going to be able to read all of the scriptures that kind of go with this, but if you're Bible literate, you're going to know these stories. And if you're not Bible literate, I will give you where the stories are at so that you can go back and read them in their fullness. But I wanted to talk about what happened when they came out of Egypt, because when they were delivered from the bondage of the Pharaoh and they crossed the Red Sea, of course, Miriam led them in praise and in worship and in dancing and in singing, and they had a great time on this side of the sea. However, after that, things began to be a lot harder than I think anyone had expected them to be. They were without food, they were without water, they were basically without shelter, they were wandering around in the desert, they were lost, and they were trying to survive in a barren wasteland. And they had no direction. They had no path forward in their lives because they were slaves. They couldn't fight. They had no land. They had no nation. Where they were at was uninhabitable. They knew they couldn't stay. The promised land was already settled. They knew they couldn't take it. And so they were in this place of distress, this place of crisis, this place of wandering around. As Moses leads them through the desert, he brings them to Mount Sinai, and he goes up this mountain and he stays for 40 days and 40 nights. And so the only sense of direction, the only anchor that they had in their minds just left. And then day after day after day, he didn't come back. And it's not like he had told them, okay, I'm going to be up here for 40 days and then I'm coming back. They had no idea, and it's been over a month. And so they're confused and they're lost. And so this is what it says in Exodus 32. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives and of your sons and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And the people brake off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aaron. And he received them at their hand, and he fashioned it with a graven tool, and he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. Which, by the way, play here is sexual. It's not just, they're not out here playing Monopoly. So while this is going on, during this 40 days where they make this calf, something else is also happening. If you want to read it sometime, you can go back to Exodus about 24 and just basically read Exodus 24 to 32 if you don't know what I'm talking about. But right here in the midst of this golden calf being formed, God is at the top of the mountain with Moses, and God is giving him specific instructions on how to construct the tabernacle and all the furnishings of the tabernacle, the table, the altar of incense, the brazen altar, the Ark of the Covenant, etc. All of these detailed instructions on how to do that. So when they're in this place of being lost, in a barren place, in a time of crisis, when they have no path forward, when there's no direction, that in one place, when the man climbs to the top of the mountain in the presence of God, he is receiving one thing. One thing is emerging, the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant. But at the bottom of the mountain, something else is emerging, and it's this golden calf. And so, if you take those two and compare them, for one thing, the tabernacle is extremely complex, but the calf is very, very simple. And a lot of times in life, we shy away from the complex things, especially when we're in the time of crisis. That tabernacle was extremely costly. You can go through and read it and all the details of all this gold and all this bronze and all this silver. It's going to require skilled artisan, engravings and different things like that. Whereas the calf was very cheap. In fact, if you noticed, Aaron said to the men, go get your wives, sons, and daughters' earrings. So they got to keep their own. So there was a sacrifice involved, but it was easy. It was cheap because it was someone else's sacrifice, that you're letting someone else suffer so that you can construct this thing. But the tabernacle also had some serious advantages over the calf. For one thing, the calf was the stationary thing in the middle of the desert, and it wasn't doing anything, but the tabernacle was designed to move. The tabernacle was connected through the Ark of the Covenant to the cloud of glory, and the cloud of glory was going to move them forward through the desert, and eventually it was going to take them to the Jordan River, and the Ark of the Covenant was going to step into the Jordan River and pull back the waters so that they could cross on dry land. So it was moving them. It was getting them out of the desert. But the golden calf was keeping them occupied and keeping them content and happy in the desert. So it was actually anchoring them to the place where they knew they couldn't stay long term. It was holding them in this bondage so that they couldn't get out. So it was really more than stationary. It was like a shackle on the legs of the nation. The tabernacle involved great sacrifice, animal sacrifices. But the sacrifices that they're making before this calf are sexual ones. They're taking joy and pleasure and just taking part in the hedonism of the flesh to just give yourself what you want. The tabernacle came out of the presence of God. It was something that was transcendent. It didn't have anything to do with their current circumstance. In fact, it endured even into the promised land. They would go there to worship even after the conquest of Canaan. Whereas the golden calf was born out of panic. It was born out of distress. It was born out of not properly dealing with the storms and trials that were at hand. The tabernacle was extremely time consuming. It took them a long time to build this thing and get it all right. But the golden calf was haphazard. It was quick. It was seemingly a solution coming from nowhere. I'm sure you already see where I'm going with this, that there are times in our lives when we are lost in the desert. And people that are lost in the desert, if they're not careful, can lend themselves to the golden calf worship, can throw themselves into things that make them feel better about where they're at, rather than doing the hard thing, which is climb to the top of the mountain and get some direction. And I've watched people, I've always called them floaters, that people that just stay lost in the desert. They go from job to job, from exciting thing to exciting thing, from distraction to distraction, but they never plow forward in their lives. They pretty much get what's handed to them, whatever. Aaron actually kind of gives this funny statement to Moses when Moses finally comes down and sees the calf. He's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, we threw this gold in the fire and the calf just popped out." And That's people's attitudes when they approach life, though. That, they didn't really mean to have a golden calf. It just sort of popped out. Like, this is just what life handed me. But life doesn't hand you anything. It's what you do. It's the decisions that you make in your life. It's whether or not you choose to pray and seek God and get something from God and walk in that and make the appropriate sacrifices to bring that thing to pass. It has nothing to do, but I've watched people approach life with well, this is the job that was in front of me, so I took it, and this was the person in front of me, so I married them, and it seemed like we were supposed to have kids then, and they just sort of fell into their lives. And so in some sense, they made their own golden calf, but also the golden calf just sort of walked out of the fire because it wasn't something that they did intentionally. It was the decision that they made through indecision. Now let's fast forward a long time, hundreds of years, all the way to the days of Solomon. David has defeated every enemy. He's killed every giant. There's no giants left. Everything has been finished. The only thing that's left is David didn't build a temple. So he leaves the plans. He leaves the gold and all of the supplies that he's going to need. And so when Solomon takes the throne, he's essentially just handed a job from David. Build this temple. There's nothing to hinder him. There's no one to fight. There's nothing to distract him from it. And so he sets forth doing exactly what David handed him to do. After 7 long years, he completes it, and he builds his own house, and that takes another 14 years. And so now I don't know if he did those concurrently or if he did them one at a time. So maybe 21 years, maybe 14 years of working. Either way, he's finished. And now he's in this time of peace. And so let me read to you what it says in 1 Kings 11:4. For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burnt incense and sacrificed unto their gods. So again, he's arrived at this place where he's already accomplished. So he's probably about 60, because he took the throne at 40. He's been working for about 20 years. So he's like 60, 61, something like that. Now he's done. He's accomplished everything. And like I said, there's no giants to hunt down anymore. There's no enemies. He's at peace with every nation around him. And so what do you do when you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish? When you've built what you've set out to build? Well, that's the question. And it's an oddly similar place to being in the desert. The place of total peace and accomplishment resembles the desert, because in both places, you're now without direction. One place, you're without direction because of crisis. Here, you're without direction because of success. But either way, what happens when you arrive at a place and you have no direction and no path forward? Well, something amazing can happen. You can build a temple. You can build something can emerge that's far greater than the tabernacle. This is strong and it's grand and it's enduring throughout generations, but it's also more expensive. It requires greater sacrifices. It is equipped to handle going forward greater sacrifices that will continuously be demanded. It's a lot harder to do that, but you can also go and do the golden calf thing. You can go find some beautiful women. You can marry yourself to your distractions, and you can begin to worship other gods, and you can set up high places on the mountain to worship all these other gods. And of course, they're doing the same stuff that they were doing before the golden calf, only worse, because the good is getting better and the bad is getting worse. And so now instead of one golden calf, it's 3 gods. And instead of it just being a sexual fun, which is where Solomon's issue started, was a sexual desire. But that blossoms into child sacrifices and human sacrifices, which are the ways you worship Chemosh and Milcom is Molech, if you don't recognize the name, where you pass your children through the fire. When you're in that place of peace and accomplishment, you're not some ragtag group of people that are disoriented in the middle of the wilderness with no resources. You are at a good place. You've arrived. You can do something greater than they could do. And so you can let that place, if you're willing to say, you know what, I don't have this peace to sit around and do nothing. I've accomplished what I've accomplished to bring me to this point so that I can climb the higher mountain, so that I can get the greater temple, so that I can build something that is able to reach and help more people. I'm here because I'm strong enough to handle a greater responsibility going forward, not to cast off all responsibility and just have some me time at this point. And that's a difficult decision to make, because if you've spent all this time and if you've arrived at this place, it does seem justified. It does feel like, oh, well, now it's my turn. It's my turn to relax. And I'm not saying you can't take a breather and enjoy, the fruit of your labor. But what I am saying is you're not supposed to camp out in that place and never learn and never grow and never move forward in your life. You have to find your next step. And so now the story is going to reiterate itself again, but it's going to change a little bit this time. And I'm not going to read it, but when Solomon's son Rehoboam takes the throne, there's this whole deal where the people of Israel come and they're like, look, your father was really hard on us. He pushed us really hard. Just back off a little bit. Give us a break. We need a 3-day weekend. I don't know. And Rehoboam makes a decision, because he's in a place of indecision and he seeks counsel at the old men and the young men. And so here he is again, and he's lost. His father has handed him this kingdom, but he doesn't know what to do with it. And now he's got problems, and now he doesn't know what to do. And so he's seeking an answer. So Rehoboam's place is a lot like the place of peace, even though he's dealing with trouble. And it's a lot like the desert, even though he's not wandering around lost in the desert, but he's in a place of trying to find that path forward. He's in a place of indecision where he has choices to make. And in that, he makes a bad call. He decides to tell him, listen, I'm going to make it harder on you. I'm going to make it worse on you. And so when he makes a bad decision, he actually splinters the nation, and a man named Jeroboam comes in and takes the 10 tribes of Israel. The nation splits into Israel and Judah. Rehoboam retains Judah, and Jeroboam goes in, and to keep the people away from the temple of Solomon, he sets up 2 golden calves for them to worship. And so these golden calves emerge again. Now, what the story is trying to pull us into is, in the story of Sinai and in the story of, Solomon, in both these situations, you see 2 things emerging at once. But in your life, 2 things won't emerge at once. But you'll have 2 options. You can go to the top of the mountain and see something great, but that costs a lot, emerge. Or you can stay at the bottom of the mountain and have the golden calves. And so Rehoboam is like us. He made a decision, and his decision had fallout, and he made the wrong decision, and something greater than the Temple of Solomon didn't emerge in his life. Instead, something terrible emerged, 2 golden calves. And in both nations, Judah and Israel, even if a good king showed up, these idols remained. The golden calves in Israel remained. The high place that Solomon built remained. Even when a king would come in and destroy the idols, he would leave the ones that Solomon made on top of this mountain. So let me take you to Josiah in 2 Kings 23:11. And he took away the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun at the entering in of the house of the Lord by the chamber of Nathan-Melech, the chamberlain, which was in the suburbs, and burned the chariots of the sun with fire, and the altars that were on the top of the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made in the 2 courts of the house of the Lord, did the king beat down, and he brake them down from thence, and cast the dust of them into the brook Kidron, and the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the mount of corruption, which Solomon, the king of Israel, had builded for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Zidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile. And he brake into pieces the images and cut down the groves, and he filled the places with the bones of men. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel and the high place of Jeroboam, which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, had made, both that altar and the high place he broke down, and he burned the high place, and he stamped it small to powder and burned the grove. Now, Josiah embarks in this amazing revival, and he destroys every single bit of it. He tears down all these idols. And so, you know what? Even if you've made the bad decisions and you've built the golden calves and you've set up high places in your life, that there's always hope for revival. But you have to do the hard thing. Because the hard thing is the thing that you didn't do in the first place, which is what got you to the golden calf. So you have to go back and you have to tear down the wrong thing. You have to tear down the distraction. You have to tear down the thing that's pulling you away from the top of the mountain. And so the name of this mountain, the Mount of Corruption, this is the only place in the Bible it calls this the Mount of Corruption. And it became known as the Mount of Corruption because it was the place that Solomon built these idols, and they corrupted themselves with idols. But the name Mount of Corruption did not endure. There's a name change. It's the same thing that Jacob experienced, that you go down to the river and you wrestle and you say, you know what, I've been doing the easy thing. I've been doing the lying, cheating thing. I've been doing the give myself what I want at the expense of everybody around me thing. But now I'm ready to go back and do the hard thing. And that's the mercy of the redemption of Jesus, that when you come to him and you're like, I'm ready now. I'm ready to lay down the altars. I'm ready to throw down my golden calves and beat them into powder and cast them into the brook. I'm ready to go build my tabernacle, to build my temple here, to make the good decision. When you do that, there's a name change. Your identity changes. Who you are changes. He transforms you from the inside out. That sometimes the reason we didn't do the hard thing is we're like, I'm not that guy. I'm not able. And that's true. But that's what he does. He gets in you because he's that guy. He's the one that's able. And he changes you from the inside out. And he gives you the desires you didn't have in the first place. And he gives you the joy in the journey and the joy of the accomplishment, and makes it worth it all. And so here, there's a name change. And they didn't call it the Mount of Corruption anymore. When you get to the New Testament, they call it the Mount of Olives. This is where Jesus went up to preach. He sat down on the Mount of Olives and he began to prepare them for the future. And he began to tell them of what was coming, the tribulation and all these things. He began to give them revelation of that. This is also the place where down at the bottom of the mountain, that place where the golden calf ought to inhabit, because that's at the foot of Sinai. That's where the calf was. Instead, now there's the Garden of Gethsemane. And so it's the place of prayer. It's the place of surrender. It's the place of laying down your will. It's the place of taking the hard cup, even though you're honest with God and you're like, I don't want to drink this. I don't want to do this. You know, I had an experience. We had a crusade last year, and it took a year of my life pouring into that crusade, making phone calls, having meetings, put out money. It was such a daunting task. I never did anything like that before. And the whole time I just felt that so strong, like, I don't want to do this. And I would go into prayer and be like, but I don't want to do this. This is too hard. And I'm doing other things, and the other things that I'm doing, I'm used to. And there's an accomplishment there. And, you know, just let me be Solomon. Let me just build my temple and accomplish this. But I just felt this from the Lord. Like, this was the vision for the year. This is what he wanted me to do that year. And it was the biggest soul winning meeting I've ever had in my ministry. It was incredible, an incredible 3 days. So many people were fed. So many people prayed to ask the Lord in their hearts. Even the biggest crowd I've ever had under my tent. And so the Lord was just so present in every single bit of it. And, you know, you have to have the Garden of Gethsemane down at the bottom of that mountain in order to accomplish the vision that's laid out in front of you. And, now that was last year. I need a vision for this year. You need a vision for this year. Instead of having a bunch of New Year's resolutions that you're not going to keep anyway, why not make 2025 the year that you have fresh vision for your life? Because you need that space where that golden calf is. You need that space where those idols at the top of the mountain are. You need that to be demolished to make room for Jesus in that private place, in that inward place of prayer, and in that public place, in that place of your life, to make way, to prepare you for the future, to carry you across the river, to bring you into the promised land, and to build something that will endure in your life, in the life of your spouse, in the life of your children, in the life of your community, and in the life of your church. I hope this was a blessing to you. Please, if it was, do me a small favor. Just like this, subscribe to it, ring a bell, share it, just post about it. Text it to somebody you know that maybe would be interested, or maybe you think would be blessed to hear it. And of course, if you want to help me, if you want to give, if you want to become a monthly partner, links are in the description. I appreciate you so very much. Check us out, BurningLightsMinistries.com. Until next time, God bless you. Happy New Year.